Ooh. I bet none of you were expecting this, but here we are. So I have my normal show, which I do at least once a week on either a Monday or a Thursday. Sometimes both. I won't be able to do the Thursday one, but I think I'm going to reschedule it to Friday around noon. Again, apologies for some of the inconsistent times, but I'm trying to be consistent. College schedule, Thanksgiving's coming around, but after that it should be pretty back to normal. But I think that for some things, and I'm going to update the description of this live after I'm finished with it. I'm going to include all the articles that I'm going to read and some of the statistics and topics that we're going to be discussing tonight. For thoughts on just things that I'm interested in as the day comes and goes, I want to do something called the Late Night Ordeal, which is probably going to be starting later at night when either I'm bored or just for a myriad of reasons. I don't know if that for a myriad or MYRIAD, I think is how you say it. For a myriad of reasons, I'll go live just randomly, I think, at times, and yeah, it'll be with this logo, late at night. Sam is live instead of the usual, and we're just gonna be talking college football. Hey Zach, how are you doing? P says go Vols. Also got money on Michigan money line over OSU. Oh, you best believe we're gonna talk about the game today. And we're also going to talk about Nebraska's coaching search. So, any of you Cornhusker fans, any of you, hopefully some of you do get on here, or at least you'll watch this. We're talking about you guys today. We're also talking about Ohio State and their physicality, because I saw something in an Instagram post which ranked them like outside of the top 10 in physicality, and there is somewhat of a reason to believe in that. At the same time, though, I do want to talk about it. Go Big Red. Armand says he needs a 5X shirt for Penn State and Nebraska. You can find that, Armand, by visiting my merchandise store and buying one of those. Or you can wait around, and in a month or so, or soon, I don't know when, I'm thinking at either 9,000 or 10,000 subscribers, I'm going to have a giveaway that includes my merch, and we're going to give away a few t-shirts or sweaters or of the like. So yeah, you can stay tuned for that as well, because a giveaway is coming soon. Make sure to share this live around so we can get this party going. Pump those numbers up. But yeah, just decided today that why don't we sit down and go live. That's exactly what I'm doing, to talk about Nebraska's head coaching search. So I went live with Corn Crazed last Thursday, like 6 days ago, and we talked about him. He asked me a lot of questions about Nebraska's head coaching search. Names included are Lane Kiffin, current head coach at Ole Miss, Bill O'Brien, offensive coordinator and QB coach at Alabama, Chris Kleiman, head coach at Kansas State, Mark Stoops, head coach at Kentucky, Lance Leipold, head coach at Kansas, Matt Rule, former head coach of the Carolina Panthers, right now unemployed. You also have who was Dave Aranda, head coach at Baylor, Deion Sanders, head coach at Jackson State, and you got Mickey Joseph being the interim head coach currently of Nebraska. There's a lot of candidates for this Nebraska head coaching search. A lot of them. So, yeah, a lot of them to select from. I'm going to read an article talking specifically about Matt Rule, and then talk about Bill O'Brien, Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold eyed as Nebraska's head coach. Bleacher Report they published that article. Sports Illustrated, Fan Nation, all Huskers published the article about Matt Rule. Those will be linked in the description down below at the end of this live stream is when they will be linked down below. And then we'll talk about Ohio State's physicality and just talk about the game for a little bit. And the game, well, it's going to be one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game at the end of the year. And after that, they might rematch in the national championship game. And Ohio State, for all the crap that is given to it, some of it rightly so, just watch the Northwestern game. It is a more physical team than I think people do give it credit for. So I want to give credit where it's due. It isn't necessarily Ohio State's fault that both Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson can't stay healthy, and that certainly doesn't help their run game. Jamie Dugall, let's read some comments. Chris with Kansas State is out of the mix. He's getting a contract extension. Patterson with Texas said he has not talked to Nebraska at all. Well, that's pretty good, because I think Gary Patterson is frankly too old for, in my opinion, too old to be considered for the Nebraska head coaching job. I think they need someone younger, in my opinion, and Gary Patterson is well past his prime. Lane Kiffin, it has been rumored that he has accepted a deal to become Auburn's next head coach. Similar rumors were talked about with Deion Sanders in Nebraska. We will see if these things come true or not. But I want to first get into the article about Matt Rule and Nebraska. Matt Rule, he has college head coaching experience. I want to lay the groundwork for you all. Was the head coach at Baylor for 3 years, head coach at Temple for 4. At Temple, he went 28 and 23, 19 and 13 in conference. He had, in his final 2 seasons at Temple, 20 wins, 7 losses, 14 wins in conference, only 2 losses in conference. And his 2016 Temple team finished, they were 24th in the AP poll before losing in the Military Bowl to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, a game in which Matt Rule wasn't the head coach because he had already left for Baylor. He got to Baylor and they went 1-11, 1-8 in conference, but that was after the whole sexual assault scandal went down at Baylor, where Art Briles, the university president, and the AD just got up, were fired, or resigned, and several guys left that program through the portal. Jarrett Stidham being one of them, who transferred to Auburn and is now on the roster of, I think, the Las Vegas Raiders in the NFL. Spent some time with the Patriots. But a lot of talent left there. The program was destitute. So 1-11 first year. He brings them up to 7-6, 4-5 in conference in 2018. And then the story of 2019 happens, where Baylor starts off. They're expected to finish 6th in the Big 12, ahead of lowly teams like Texas Tech, West Virginia, Kansas State, and Kansas. And lo and behold, you get a team that starts out 5-0. They then get ranked and beat Texas Tech in overtime, and they're 9-0 entering their matchup with number 10 Oklahoma, who at that point in the year, Oklahoma, they already suffered. I think they already suffered a loss. Yep, to Kansas State. At Kansas State, they already suffered a loss. There, they lose to Oklahoma. They choked that game. Then they were 11-1 in their rematch with Oklahoma, lost that, and got dominated by Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And then Matt Rule went off to the NFL, had an 11-27 record with the Panthers for 2.5 seasons before being axed after his 5th game in the 2022 season. Good college coach. He's proven he does more with less talent. If he were to come to Nebraska, it'd be by far the school with the most resources that he has been at. And he's a proven builder. He built up Temple from nothing. He built up Baylor from nothing. So proven builder. He'd have his most talented collegiate team by far at the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and he's a culture builder. And Matt Rule played college ball at Penn State. He was an assistant at Penn State for 1998 as a volunteer. Temple is East Coast, somewhat East Coast school. Been with the New York Giants too, and Baylor has Texas connections too. So he has been in Big Ten, Big 12, former Nebraska territory, because Nebraska did used to be a part of the Big 12. So all these things do help his case. And he's under the age of 50. He's 47. Now I'm reading the article. Since the firing of Scott Frost on September 11th, there has been a lot of candidates mentioned as possible successors to Scott Frost as the permanent head coach at Nebraska. A lot of them. And Matt Campbell, Dave Aranda, Bill O'Brien, Luke Fickell, I've not really heard that name too much, Lance Leipold, Kyle Whittingham, and Chris Kleiman. Kyle Whittingham really shocks me. He's not leaving Utah. Are some of the better known names. Add another to the list. His name is Matt Rule. The same Matt Rule who was fired earlier this fall as the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. So why do people think he might be a good hire for the Nebraska job? We've already discussed his profile, so we're going to go over that. Why he'd be a good pick to coach at Nebraska? It talks about how he really rebuilt Temple from the ground up. Matt took over a Temple program that in the prior 10 years only had 3 winning seasons. The other 7 years, the Owls had records of 0-11, 1-11, 2-10, 2-9, 4-8, and 1-5-7 season. They had 2 1-11 seasons. Rule then led the Owls to back-to-back 10-win seasons his last 2 years at Temple. Next move was to Baylor, where he replaced Jim Grobe, who had taken over for Art Briles, and that whole sexual assault thing and the mass exodus of transfers and the investigations and the cover-up by the university. I don't know too much about that, but that's what I knew from what I've briefly read, is that the university tried to cover it up. They failed. It's why everyone from the athletic department basically resigned after that entire debacle, which was horrible. And I mean, he's a proven builder. The one downside of him is his overall record. Like, he's 47-43 as a collegiate head coach, but he's never been anywhere for too long. Went to Temple, got uprooted by Baylor. Went to Baylor, got uprooted by the NFL. You know, quickly climbing the ladder as fast as he could. He hit his ceiling. He actually overachieved his ceiling. That's why he never had even close to a winning record at Carolina. Now he is back, unemployed, open for the job market. Maybe he wants to go to Nebraska and settle for a little bit. I guarantee you, even though I don't think he is the best candidate for the Husker job, I'll mention who I think the best candidate is. And you might already know if you watched the Corn Craze live stream. I think he would do well at Nebraska. I think that he would give a very kind of Bo Pelini feel. And by that I mean consistently contend for the division, consistently win the division, get some double-digit winning seasons, probably 8, 9, 10, maybe an 11-win season, because, let's be honest, the Big Ten West is horrible. It's been at one of its weakest points it's ever been at, and that's saying something, because the West has always been weak. I agree with what Armand Hammer said, talking about the Panthers are a tough job for anyone, and even Spurrier bombed in the NFL. Look, Urban Meyer bombed in the NFL. Urban Meyer completely bombed. It's not the same game. You have to be, in my opinion, you got to be a better manager, in my opinion, than you have to be in college. But for college football, you got to be recruiting. If you want to be at the top level, there are other ways around it. But like, if you're a Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, it's a 365 day a year job. Really 366. Honestly, because it feels like you have to work 25/8. always put in an extra hour or find an hour extra where there isn't one to recruit, to develop, to keep the staff, to keep the culture engaged. It's a hard game for college football. In the NFL, it's similar, if not harder, and part of it being harder has to do with the fact that talent allocation and all resources are pretty equal. So if you're at a better college, program, you have talent advantage. You have a lot of things going your way somewhat naturally. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't hard work that goes into it. There is. Like Nick Saban and Kirby Smart are some of the hardest working college football head coaches. In the NFL, the league's pretty communistic in a sense, as my sports econ professor said. Like, everything's shared pretty equally, so you really have to be a superior coach and manager to win, because really nothing else is carrying you. And if you're in the case of Bill Belichick, winning often, having a dynasty over several years, if anything, is going to give you less talent because of the reverse order draft. But anyway, I digress. There's not much of an argument against Matt Rule based on his college resume coming to Baylor. He's a pretty stable option, honestly. Very, very stable option. He doesn't have as high of a ceiling as some other candidates, but he doesn't have as low of a floor either. He's pretty known. Like guys like Lane Kiffin, for example. You want Lane Kiffin at Nebraska? He's been at Ole Miss 3 seasons. And yeah, they went 10-3 last year. They're probably going to get another 10-win season this year. We'll see if he leaves to Auburn or not. But he's previously bombed at USC, bombed at Tennessee, bombed at Las Vegas. And he lives and dies by the portal, which can cause some issues. Lives and dies by the portal. That can cause some issues. And if you want to contend, beat top teams, he didn't beat Baylor last year. He didn't beat Alabama. This year he didn't beat Alabama. He didn't beat LSU. I have yet to see him win a big game at Ole Miss or win a big game anywhere. And I know Nebraska fans, you'd be content with 8-9 win seasons, but you do want that big win. All of us want that big win. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. Matt Rule himself, speaking of big wins, doesn't have one either. It's hard to get big wins. And a lot of the coaches who do have big wins are already locked down. Like Mel Tucker, Jim Harbaugh, Ryan Day, heck, even James Franklin has some few big wins. They're locked down already. So the pool of candidates, I saw that Luke Fickell was mentioned, but I highly doubt he will go to Nebraska. Maybe he will. I mean, Lincoln Riley went to USC and Brian Kelly went to LSU. And in year one, both of those guys are heading to their conference championship games, very likely. LSU, it's already locked down. USC, if they beat UCLA, they're a lock to get in. They will be absolutely a lock to get in if they beat UCLA, which I think is likely. Let's move on to an article by Bleacher Report, and then we'll come back, discuss some of these thoughts, read the chat, and then talk some Ohio State football. In college, you need to be a dad. In the pros, you need to be a leader, but not a dad. It's a very good point. Look at Nick Saban, for example. You can't be treating players like they're college kids. He tried that in the NFL, and it just didn't work. You don't have the same authority over players. And with NIL, that could change. But at the same time, a lot of those are done through endorsement deals, not actual salaries. And I think some of that, I don't think until it's like truly pay for play, which would be universities paying the athletes, I don't think it would evolve to the level it is at in the pros with some of that, kind of mutual respect and authority to a certain degree. You got to be a leader. You got to earn the respect of your locker room because there is no enforced respect in the pros. Okay. Report Bill O'Brien, Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold eyed as next Nebraska head coaches. I want to paint a picture to you. Bill O'Brien, hot name candidate. Like And even I, was saying that maybe we should have him at Michigan. And I was saying this, when Jim Harbaugh was rumored to leave, whether it was in 2020 or in 2021. Fast forward a few months later, close to a year later. Do you still want Bill O'Brien? Do you, whether you're like Nebraska fan, do you want the guy who has Bryce Young, Tyler Harrell, Jermaine Burton, Jahmyr Gibbs, Trey Sanders, Cameron Latu, Ja'Cory Brooks? I ashamedly can't name anyone on their offensive line, and that's my bad. I can name backup QB Jalen Milroe, though, who reminds me of Lamar Jackson. He's taken that offense and not exactly done not done good with it. Struggling against Texas A&M, struggling against Texas, struggling in other games as well, not doing a great job against, LSU, not managing games properly, throwing too often when you have Jahmyr Gibbs and Trey Sanders and not using them as much as they could be used, putting the game on Bryce Young's back. I think Alabama leads the nation in most busted plays. You watch Alabama football and their production comes from Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. It comes from busted plays. They have no offensive line. They don't. And they do really, but for the 5-star talent that's there, they have probably a more talented O-line by raw power than anyone except for maybe Georgia and Ohio State. They are horrifically inefficient on offense and defense. Do you want Bill O'Brien as your head coach? Because earlier, I would have, but now I don't. Husker Corner. Crazy to me that people seem to dismiss the possibility of 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff. If Ohio State and Michigan both look amazing and it's the game of the year, I could see the loser getting in. I agree. If TCU loses, I think it's close to a lock. Same thing if USC loses, which, they're playing UCLA, then Notre Dame, then probably Utah in the Pac-12 championship, which that would lead to USC, if it would lose one of those games. LSU will probably get smoked by Georgia in the SEC title game. And TCU, very likely that they will lose in one of their next 3 games. So, yeah, I think it's very likely that both Michigan and OSU, regardless, will get into the college football playoff. There is a very likely chance. Bill O'Brien has positives and negatives like every candidate. I don't really care who the head coach is, to be honest. Nebraska's to break the losing energy and finally win, and they will get over the hump. Well, a lot of that does depend on the head coach. And I was willing to forgive Bill O'Brien for what happened with the Texans. Granted, he's done better in the NFL than Matt Rule could ever dream of doing, and he helped Penn State get on the right track. I mean, James Franklin inherited a decent to good situation at Penn State because of what Bill O'Brien did there. But when he tried to be general manager, tried to be control freak, tried to be Bill Belichick, it didn't work out for him. And he's probably going to be canned after this season at Alabama. So those are just some negatives to take into consideration. But I want to get back to the article. Just talk about some possible candidates linked to the Huskers per Bruce Feldman. Chris Kleiman, Kansas State head coach. Washington State head coach Jake Dickert. Jamie Chadwell of Coastal Carolina. Bronco Mendenhall of Virginia. Okay, now that would be big time. That you would break your losing mentality if you got Bronco Mendenhall. You would immediately have a winning culture. Carolina Panthers head coach Matt Rule. Texas special assistant Gary Patterson. Listen, he's too old. And Wisconsin DC Jim Leonard, if Wisconsin doesn't want him, I don't know, because that might be saying something. But Wisconsin, given that they fired Christ, might also be saying they're looking for big fish to fry. And if you give Jim Leonhard some patience, if Wisconsin isn't able to, maybe you'll be able to steal their diamond in the rough. And that would be awesome if you were a Husker fan. Frost seemed like the perfect hire to get Nebraska football on track. Championship quarterback in 1997, as you all know. And he's gone. He did well at UCF. He did well at smaller programs like a lot of these candidates. Lane Kiffin at FAU, Matt Rule at Temple. Bill O'Brien, what he did with Penn State and with the sanctions they had was good. A lot of these guys they've won at different places, not named Nebraska. But people are wondering if someone can come in and fix the culture. That's really what Nebraska fans are wondering here. And Trev Alberts, as Alberts told reporters, if you hear that Trev Alberts reached out to XYZ coach, it might very well be true. Doesn't mean I'm trying to hire that coach. I'd like to get that perspective. I'd like to get a perspective of a coach who isn't here right now about our job and what the uniqueness is and the needs and those sort of things. Here's the thing about Trev Alberts. I don't know who Nebraska's going to hire. But I think whoever he does hire, I like Trev Alberts. I like what he did with Frost, giving him a chance, forcing him to make moves. And Frost, in my opinion, made good coaching assistant moves. The problem was just him, so they removed him out of the equation. They have resources, as proven by NIL deals, as proven by as proven by the fact they fired Frost and paid him $15 million to just get out when they could have waited and it would have been cut in half. And it sounds like Trey Palmer and Garrett Nelson might very well be coming back next year because they're not walking on senior day. So these are great things. This is fantastic news. Fantastic news. And I watched part of Corn Cray's live stream on this, and he's like, when you have a guy who is like the rock of the defense, a player with a high ceiling who's coming back, it's big. Like, Nebraska has talent. Nebraska has good history. The Block N means something. It means infinitely more than anything in the West Division does. And you're in Lincoln. You have nothing else to do but Nebraska football. So there's no competition. You are a monopoly in your own state, and probably South Dakota, North Dakota. You could be in Missouri and Kansas and even Iowa if you were to get back to prominence. But Alberts wants to get better perspective, and I mean, who knows? Like what Kells 14 was talking about with Deion Sanders and Jackson State. How much money do you give him? Now, I think that, in my opinion, is actually my favorite candidate. That's absolutely my favorite candidate, is Deion Sanders. He will bring hype. He will bring energy. He will bring charisma. He will bring talent. He will bring it all to Nebraska. There's the only one danger. One about that hire. There's only one danger. It could be Scott Frost 2.0. But the likelihood of that happening again, I don't think so. That would be damning if that were to happen again. And I don't think it'll happen again, frankly. But that's the only danger. He would get tons of recruits. He would utilize NIL. He has, sorry for that air bubble, he has a winning record at his current school. Much like Scott Frost with UCF, he's building back up a program that didn't have much, and within 2 years had an awesome turnaround. So I like the idea of Deion Sanders in the same way that I would have liked the idea of Scott Frost when Nebraska hired him in 2018. It's the perfect ideal candidate, I think. That's the only danger, though, is Nebraska's done that before in theory. It didn't work out. But I think doing that 2 times in a row, your likelihood of both of those being complete flops is unlikely. I don't think Nebraska should be risk averse just because of what happened to Scott Frost. They got to go out, they got to get a winning guy, and a lot of the candidates named out there are winning guys. But Deion Sanders, you get him, you get to have him keep Mickey Joseph on the staff, have him hire some big names. Why? You have immediately media attention, recruits attention, you have money, you have hype, you have basically free media coverage because they will fawn over a guy like Sanders because he played in the NFL a lot, and because Deion Sanders he's a guy who speaks his mind. He's not afraid of anything. So I think that'd be an awesome hire. But could they keep them? Oh, Sanders would keep them. Sanders would keep the guys. The question about Sanders, the only question about him is if he gets here, could it all just fall apart? With the fact that the Big Ten West, I mean, you're playing not different football. You know, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, just like it's FCS football. FCS players go into the NFL. FCS players and HBCU players, they play football. They use similar formations. In fact, they probably innovate more because they don't have the same talent. But it is a jump going from, Jackson State to a school like Nebraska. Different expectations, different powers that be, and different competition. You're in theory, not all the time in practice, but in theory facing tougher competition and tougher, coaches. And fan support too. Fan support is awesome at Nebraska, and it will be even made stronger with Deion Sanders coming. Also, I would love to see Deion Sanders walking across the field and shaking hands with Ryan Day or Jim Harbaugh or James Franklin. That would just be awesome. That would be breathtaking. Absolutely breathtaking. So I'm going to link both of these articles down below. And have you guys decide for yourselves who you want as Nebraska's head coach in football. I think Deion Sanders and Lane Kiffin are great candidates. I'd prefer Deion for sure. Mark Stoops I didn't talk about too much, but they're a defensive team. They like to run the football. They're good about trench play, which is something that Nebraska's not had solid trench play anywhere near Kentucky's under Mark Stoops since Ndamukong Suh was at Nebraska. So, honestly, you have plenty of good candidates. And there's not a ton of competition either. You have Wisconsin. You have Auburn. But I'd rather go to Nebraska than Auburn. Auburn, if you make the wrong people mad, you get fired. Or they try and axe your head off. I think Brian Harson's a good head coach. But when you have no support, it doesn't really matter. Urban Meyer, if Nebraska somehow gets him, that'd be interesting. I think that'd be a great hire too. But much like the Luke Fickell thing, I think it's very unlikely. Not realistic. Same as Prime is a politician. Speaking of coaches, would a defensive or offensive coach be better for Nebraska? Ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Defensive or offensive head coach be better for Nebraska? I hate to go with what Nebraska just got rid of, which was an offensive-minded head coach, but I'd say offense. But I don't know. Mainly because I'm talking from as a Michigan fan too. My head coach is supposedly offensive-minded, but you look at his teams, and his teams are defensive-minded. Mel Tucker, they won 11-2 because of Kenneth Walker, but their coach is defensive-minded. James Franklin, resume, defensive-minded head coach. Ryan Day is the only offensive-minded head coach who's had success here in the Big Ten. I want something refreshing, something exciting. but something that works, because Scott Frost was exciting, but it turned sour very quickly and got ugly very quickly. So if new and exciting doesn't cut it, if it's just too risky, you can, Lance Leipold actually would be the greatest compromise because he's offensive-minded, but he's not super exciting, and he's coached at D3, won several national titles there, and he's already brought Kansas back to bowl eligibility. That is possibly the best resume if you want a guy who's a builder for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I digress. I want to get into Ohio State. I know Kel's 14. I know you're an Ohio State fan, so if you're still on, you'll enjoy this a little bit. But I want to talk about some things. I want to talk about Ohio State and their physical toughness. That's what I want to talk about. Ohio State and their physical toughness. There's a post by Big Game Boomer, and speaking of which, four-star running back Mark Fletcher has decommitted from Ohio State as of 9 minutes ago, according to OSU_Buckeyes on Instagram. Don't know what that's about. I honestly haven't been following recruiting too much because A, Michigan hasn't done so well, and with NIL coming out, that means that you can now go... NIL basically means you can lose, and as long as players are getting money, they will go to said school. In America, and this is a non-football thing, but America, we're very short-term focused, especially our youth. So do you really think that when Texas A&M goes 3-7, that players will leave there if they're provided the highest amount of money compared to other schools? No. They'll stay. What NIL has done is wins and losses no longer matter for recruiting, which might actually level out the playing field, because what it will do is those universities who lose will just be consistently festered with toxic culture, and it might permanently take them out of the equation. But anyway, they're great, but they're going to lose to Michigan, says Armand. Kel's 14 says, yes, sir. DeMoney 5675 says, let's go. Okay, post by Big Game Boomer, talking about the top 25 most physical college football teams. Michigan is 1, Georgia's 2. Now, I think there's an argument for Georgia to be number 1, but I think those are the top 2 most physical teams in college football. Florida State's 3, Illinois is 4, Iowa's 5. I respectfully disagree with Iowa being 5 because they're very physical on defense, but they're the antithesis of physical on offense outside of their tight ends. Like, their offensive line is one of the worst in the Big Ten. Utah at 6, Minnesota at 7, like that. LSU at 8. LSU's scrappy. I confess I have not watched a lot of them this year, but I mainly watch Big Ten teams, so I'll say that for a lot of non-Big Ten teams, but they strike me more as scrappy. They find ways to win in close games. That strikes me more as scrappy than physical. NC State at 9, Alabama at 10, Ohio State is ranked at 11. They're ranked at 11 in this list. Now, I'm using this list just as an example, because that account's not the only account that thinks Ohio State is certainly not one of the 10 most physical teams in college football. Many others do. Many others would actually say Ohio State deserves to be lower on the list, if not completely out of the list. I disagree with that. Now, what I will say is Ohio State has had some issues with physicality. But just because they've had some issues with it doesn't mean they're not top 10 or not great at it. But they're in danger in that area to the competition they're going to face November 26th. That's the main point. Michigan's obviously, I think, the more physical team, but Michigan's one of the 2 most physical teams in the country. They have one of the best D-lines in the nation, one of the best O-lines in the nation. It's going to be hard to be more physical than a team that has one of the best overall trench plays in the country. Are you going to go over any basketball stuff once college football is finished? I think I'll live stream some Match Madness games, possibly, like I did last year. But that would probably be it. I'm going to really lean on college football this preseason for 2023. We've only allowed 31 to Penn State, and that's an atmospheric game, which matters to any team. If we're talking about physicality, we're definitely more physical than our last two defenses. That's true. And your offense this year they're better at running the football. They're better at running the football than they were last year. Like that's a given fact. This Ohio State team is, I would honestly say, better at running the football than the 2020 team. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Trey Sermon came in the season late, but also has to do with the fact that you think the Big Ten is weak this year. The Big Ten was a collection of nothings in 2020. Nothings. It was Ohio State and everyone else. And even Ohio State that year, if not for what Dabo said to give Ohio State locker room material, they would not have even been a top 4 team. Like the Big Ten that year was just a debacle. A lot of that due to the shutdown. I digress. I think Ohio State's top 10 in physicality. Now, they are, I think they're like 32nd in rushing yards per game. I'm going to look that up to double check. But I think they're 32nd. They're probably actually, that was last week, so they're higher now. Yeah, they're 22nd now because they had over 300 yards rushing against Indiana. They're top 25 in rushing yards per game. When they can stay healthy at that position, which they haven't been able to all season, they do a pretty great job on the ground. Now, they're not elite there, but they do a great job. C.J. Stroud has not even been sacked 10 times. Their defense, their linebackers play all-American caliber football. To me, that's physicality. They're more physical than Iowa was. I mean, did you watch that Iowa game? Like, the way they just forced turnovers. Iowa never got a first down. I mean, they out-physicaled Iowa. That was what was impressive about that win. Now, did they struggle? Yes. Did Iowa play one of the worst games of their season? Possibly one of the worst games in the Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz era? Yes. But they hung 54 points. They broke that team, a team who's known for being physical. They also dominated Penn State in the fourth. I mean, teams that aren't physical don't do that. Georgia was the superior team, and perhaps even the reason Georgia played Jamison Williams less Alabama close was because of a mental hurdle, and because Nick Saban knows Kirby Smart well. They kicked Alabama's butt in the fourth quarter. Saban said it himself. But this Ohio State team isn't just barely getting by every opponent. They dominated Penn State. They dominated Notre Dame in the fourth. Notre Dame is now 7-3. They're probably going to finish the season 8-4, 9-3. Probably going to win their bowl game too, but maybe not. And dominated Wisconsin, dominated Iowa, and they're going to be 11-0 heading into that Michigan game. I do not see them losing to Maryland. If they lose to Maryland, I do not know what to tell you. Teams get the shellacking. Their punter has a mean leg. Iowa's always been a scrappy team. Corn-fed O-linemen and linebackers, even when they don't do good. We scored 50-plus because of our defense. That's true. And because Spencer Petras just can't throw a football. Doom Guy mentions Xavier Johnson. Needs to be on the field if we want to block better in the open. He's a solid route runner and has massive utility in the slot, in my opinion. He also can provide you depth at running back. Dallin Hayden and Xavier Johnson at running back, let's say if Henderson and Williams are both banged up, which would be a nightmare scenario, that would still be one of the better running back rooms in college football. Dallin Hayden and Xavier Johnson. It wouldn't be top 20, maybe not top 25, but it would still be good. It'd be above average, and with Ohio State's pass game, if they scheme things properly and don't force the run, which Ryan Day has a propensity of doing this year and last year, forcing the run when it's not efficient, they could still win a national title. How do you think the OSU-Michigan game will go down this year? says DeMoney 5675. That's so tough for me. Ohio State's favored by 7, and I am going to say I'm taking Michigan to cover the spread. If the spread is anything above 3, I'm taking Michigan to cover. I see this being a very close game. Now, if one team had the likelihood to blow out the other team, Ohio State has a better chance just because of their higher scoring offense to blow out Michigan than the other way around. But if both teams are in a close game, and if it's snowing, like if you tell me the winner will win by it'll be snowy and it will be a close game, that's the final, I would be almost inclined to say Michigan. I might even pick Michigan, but I don't know yet. I'm almost 50-50 split. And the fact that I'm 50-50 split and it's in Columbus tells me that I think Michigan might win on a neutral site, and they would definitely win in Ann Arbor. But that's just me. I actually think Ohio State's the better team. I think Ohio State's more built to win a national title than Michigan is. But as I've mentioned before, Michigan's built to beat a team like Ohio State. Their pitfall is a team like Georgia, who's like them but more talented and has a better pass game. Ohio State matches up very well with a team like Georgia. Got good linebackers, good safeties, so you're not going to get, torched over the middle. And the linebackers can actually handle a guy like Brock Bowers because they're good in coverage and good at stopping the run. And they have they can target Georgia's weakness, which is, their secondary. Like last year, like this year. I'd be willing more to bet on OSU winning by 28. Says Doom Guy, I don't think any team's going to win by more than 14 or 17 points. I think that's the limit. If there is a limit past that, only Ohio State's getting past that, and they'd be winning by 21 at most. Just because, again, they're higher scoring offense. But I don't know. I'd lean Ohio State by 3 or by 6 or maybe by 4. Maybe their defense, because of Michigan's weaker red zone performance, Ohio State's defense forces Michigan to kick a field goal where OSU scores a touchdown. I'd favor Ohio State to win right now. If you put a gun to my head, I would pick Ohio State. But there's still one more game left to be played. Both teams are facing mini versions of themselves, and depending on how those games go, I will make my final pick. All about limiting in the first half, says P. I will also say that if it is close, if Ohio State is going to win, it is because they are going to start. One scenario will be because they start much faster than Michigan. Ohio State is a second half team in their own right, but Michigan's even more of a second half team. Michigan will probably do better or the same in the second half. Ohio State's going to need to have a 2019 first half performance where they wear down Michigan in the first half, and Michigan's only hope is to make those second half adjustments and come back at the end of the game. I like JJ, but how do you feel about the deep ball this year in the pass game? I don't like it. Now, because the offensive line and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and our kicker and our punter and our defense, I don't think we need a deep ball to win a national title. But that's not to say that I don't like it. And if we had a deep ball, we'd have an exponentially larger shot at going 15-0 or 14-1 or even at making the playoff. J.J. McCarthy's deep ball is worse than Cade McNamara's last year. Honestly, worse. So, he's not even top 70 in any deep ball statistics. He just isn't. He's a good QB. He is Michigan's best mobile QB. He's Michigan's most mobile QB in the Jim Harbaugh era, most mobile since Devin Gardner. And keeping that in mind, he's probably Michigan's best quarterback, or at least the Michigan quarterback with the highest ceiling since Denard Robinson. So, really good QB. I I don't like the deep ball game, but Michigan is a team that will get chunk plays. I mean, their longest plays have been on the ground this year, if I'm not mistaken. But what they'll do is Michigan's the team who gets those short to intermediate plays, and they get them pretty often. They are explosive in their own right, just mainly in the run game. They get those medium to big run plays and those short to intermediate pass plays, and eventually they just break you. Because you stack the... Last year you could stack the box against Michigan, and you could force them to punt. This year you stack the box against Michigan, and if it's the second half, they're not punting. If it's the first half, they're likely guaranteed to get a field goal, maybe punt here and there. Two-headed monster in the running back room and carried this year. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's exactly it. It's exactly it. But for Ohio State, their physicality, I think they're a physical team. Jim Knowles has commanded a defense that is 7th in opposing points per game. Jim Knowles right now has a team that allows the same amount of passing yards per game as Michigan does. I think they allow maybe one more yard. Yeah, they allow 161.2 passing yards. Michigan allows 160.1. They allow 110.3 rush yards per game. Michigan allows 72.7. And I will say that I do think Michigan has the better defense. I think Michigan specifically has the better run defense, and I think a lot of that has to do with what happened with Kenneth Walker last year. But I will also say that Michigan did have a better system in place. They're really in year 2 of an overall system, where an OSU's in year 1. And OSU is a top 10 defense. They are top 10. They're 6th in efficiency. They're technically more efficient than Michigan's defense, which is 7th. And their offense more than compensates for what their defense lacks compared to Michigan's defense. Both of these teams are top 3 teams. Michigan's more physical. Ohio State is the higher upside. But both are physical overall. Both have high upside overall. Both can go 15-0. Both can reach the playoff on their own or together. Hopefully, if they reach together, it's a rematch for winning it all. But yeah, a lot of people thought RD would take a step back this year, but Jim had to get the right players' team in his hands, and he got introduced to a garage full of Lambos, Ferraris, and Rolls-Royce. Exactly, you're not working with 3 stars and the occasional 4-star at Oklahoma State or Duke anymore. You have the full load of 5 stars and 4 stars at Ohio State. Ohio State 38-24 over Michigan, says Chris Hudson. I'm just going to spend the last few minutes here before we hit the hour mark just talking about some general things, and then we'll close out tonight. That's exactly what we'll do here. What game are you all most excited for to watch? TCU at Baylor at noon. There's UGA at Kentucky, NC State at Louisville, Miami at Clemson, Utah at Oregon. That's probably going to be the best game, I would say. Oregon is favored, but Utah is viewed by all power metrics as the better team. A lot of that being because they're more balanced. In fact, there's not even a spread for this game according to ESPN, and despite the fact that Utah is at Oregon, Utah is favored to win just slightly by the computers. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? I took Utah on my parlay, says P. TCU, Baylor, and Clemson, says Armand Hammer. Michigan's D is subsequently better than last year's. I agree with that, Kells 14. They don't have the same upside in the pass rush, but they have much more depth at pass rush, and at everywhere else they have higher upside. They have much higher upside at stopping the run. They're better at coverage. I don't think they have necessarily a Daxton Hill there, but they have Will Johnson, who's a 5-star corner. They have RJ Moten. They have DJ Turner, who's a big physical guy. Many describe him as a future player on Sundays. So, I'm really looking for... I'm I'm really looking forward to next Saturday, Michigan OSU. That's where my mind is. Like, I'm going to be making a Michigan State Indiana preview and prediction. An OSU Maryland preview and prediction will release tomorrow, and I'll probably preview Oregon Utah in a video. And hopefully we can get our Pac-12 brethren to join there. But I'm really looking forward to next weekend because of that game and because this weekend is actually the weekend of my birthday. So I'm going to be celebrating that and focusing on that. My last name is pronounced Houston. I said that I would remember that last time now that you remind me, and I didn't. I apologize for that, Chris Houston. Utah, says Armand Hammer. A P, I got Tennessee minus 21.5. They play South Carolina and the dreaded Spencer Rattler. Happy birthday, Sam. Thank you. Thank you all for those. Oregon, Utah should be a great game. Thank you guys for the birthday wishes. I'm going to get off. I will see you guys not tomorrow at noon, but I will be going live Friday at noon. I will definitely be going live Friday at noon, talking about games on Saturday and doing what I would usually do Thursday night. So I will see you guys there. See you guys later. And I'm ready to eat good food too, Kels 14. Very ready. Especially good cranberry sauce and mashed potatoes. Talk to you guys later. See you around. Go Blue.